Alrighty. Well, good evening, professors, TAs, anybody that's watching this. I am Thomas Williamson. I'm a student in 2211 Modern Physics, and this is my video on the public lecture that I attended. The one I went to was called Pearls of Wisdom. I believe it was the geometry and topology of weavables, wearables, and wallpapers. And it was presented by Professor Matsumoto. And what she talked about basically was how the geometry that we see in patterns and in the things that we create, such as clothes, wallpapers, and crafty like things like that, that's also reflected in nature. We see those patterns throughout nature, and we see how they come together to give some consistency in the science that we discover through physics and into chemistry and the different realms of science that there are that we study. So it kind of took something from our everyday experience and applied it to a more relevant field, something where it's more applicable to the degrees that we're pursuing and the areas of interest that our college is taking us to. So with that in mind, that's kind of the overview of what it was about. Learned basically just that a lot of geometries, how they're made, so different wallpaper designs, how the different rotations and translations create consistent types of patterns. That was something that was brought up pretty frequently throughout the lecture. And because of that, I did discover that there are a few basic types of wallpaper designs, something I didn't really know. I thought wallpaper was just wallpaper. There was unique sort of elements to it. But it comes down to a few basic groups, and these are called plane crystallographic groups. And so that's what constitutes just about any kind of wallpaper you have. And so it gives like a fundamental basis for all of this complex geometry that just keeps coming out. And so that was a big important fun fact for me, something I didn't know prior to it, and something maybe you know now. But to be honest, the whole reason that I learned all of this and went to the lecture was not necessarily out of interest, but the fact it was the last lecture of the semester and I needed the bucket points. So that's why I did it. And needless to say, I walked away with a little more insight, a little more, I would say, if anything, I guess, appreciation for the fact that there's a lot in the natural world around us that we study, but we don't really see in unique ways like that, the way Professor Matsumoto presented the lecture with the patterns and the types of consistencies in design that we see. And so anyway, that's the reason I went, was because I needed the bucket points. So that's honestly the truth. And let's see, what else? One thing that this kind of sparked in my mind was the fact that she talked a lot about fabrics and like clothes, wallpapers, things like that. She kept a very narrow spectrum of how we see patterns. But I also kind of realized that not only does this play into science, but it also plays into more specifically engineering, with doing SolidWorks and CADing things, building pieces in computers and all, and then 3D printing them. It's kind of the manufacturing process as a whole. See a lot of basic patterns that get repeated over and over to create complex structures, and a lot of things, mirroring features and that sort of idea. So you see how like this this simplistic idea of shapes and basic patterns carries over into more complex realm of building these sophisticated parts and machines. Because whenever we build something, in any of those classes, it always starts with simplistic shapes, simplistic patterns, and a lot of times we, translate or reflect different items to create a more varied structure. And it kind of just goes to show how not only do we just sort of see this in the world around us, this sort of relevant, I guess, appearance of patterns, but we have to use it very consistently, and it's very necessary to important work that we do in creating things and producing, new inventions and new equipment that sort of thing. So that was some way that I just sort of reflected on later on. I saw how it applied to a more broad scope and kind of fit into what I was actually doing, because when I first sat in the lecture, I was kind of wondering, okay, I'm here learning about like clothes and stuff. That's not like why am I doing this other than I need the bucket points? But after I kind of sat on it for a little bit, I realized that that was pretty helpful to see how we always go back to patterns and it affects everything we do. And so for that, I do feel like I walked away with a little bit more insight and something I definitely appreciate for sure.